For nearly a week now, Iran and Israel have been attacking each other. Iran has fired drones and missiles at Israel, and Israel has used its air force against Iran. Iranian nuclear facilities, military installations, and senior personnel have been targeted.
But civilian areas have also been struck. This is Iran's state broadcaster receiving a direct hit from an Israeli jet during a live broadcast. Other areas in the capital have also been hit, causing people to try to flee the city. Civilian areas in Israel have also been attacked. So far, more than 220 people have been killed in Iran and at least 24 in Israel.
And all of this is essentially an unprecedented escalation between the two rivals in the Middle East. But what is all this building up to? And will it reshape geopolitics in the region for years to come? It's what we're discussing today on News Desk. I'm Biresh Banerjee.
And I'm Melissa Chan. I'll be bringing in your questions and comments into the discussion to the experts who will be joining us. Many of you have already been posting in our community comments section, especially in terms of questioning what might happen in the Middle East. I just want to share a few with you and everyone else, Biresh. Quote, Iraq 2.0 all over again. That's the assessment from one of our viewers. Also from Victor Viterbo, 3952. Quote, it's going to work so well, just like Iraq and Syria and Libya. So sense a little bit of sarcasm there. And then from Funsuk Vandu, what about liberating Saudi Arabia? So people are really thinking big in terms of the geopolitical dynamics going on right now.
And this is some of the countries that we will be discussing as we move along in this conversation. But thanks for sending us those comments.
Yeah, keep those comments going. And, you know, we want to kick things off, as usual, by getting people engaged. Sherry Chan is with us. She's going to be paying attention to the chat as well. And, Sherry, I know you've also been preparing a poll, right?
Exactly. Today I will be in the chat with you, as usual. And our poll question today is, who will come out the strongest from the Iran-Israel conflict? There are 4 options: the United States, Iran, Israel, or the Gulf states. Remember to vote, and we will talk about the result later in our conversation.
Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, send us your votes. I mean, these polls I find are very interesting because they always inform our views, even though we have them towards the end. But in a way, it's a vindication of whatever conversation we've had, and hopefully that has influenced whatever votes you all eventually vote for. Votes you'll vote for. Wrong use of verbs. But anyhow, this latest confrontation between both countries started after Israel targeted Iran's nuclear and military facilities. Now, so far, targets have been attacked in these cities that you see on the map. Now, Natanz there that you see in the middle of Iran is particularly interesting because this is where a facility exists to enrich uranium. Now, part of that site has reportedly been damaged. The IAEA, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog, said last week that the country had breached its obligations concerning nuclear non-proliferation. And there were also reports that Iran was a step away from enriching uranium to military grade. And that is something that would allow Iran to essentially have a nuclear weapon. And that basically formed part of the argument behind launching these strikes. You know, this is where I'd like to sort of bring in somebody who has been watching this conflict develop since last week. And this is where I bring in Professor Sina Azodi from the George Washington University joining us. It's early in the morning where you are. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us. Before I begin with you, Professor Azodi, I'd just like to play a soundbite from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This is what he was saying last week when Israel began these strikes on Iran. Let's just have a listen to what he had to say, and then I'll come back and ask you something about that.
Tonight I wish to speak to you, the proud people of Iran. We're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation Rising Lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel.
So, Professor Azodi, that was the reasoning that was given by Benjamin Netanyahu. And for nearly a week now, Israel has been hammering away at targets in Iran. Would you say Israel has been able to disrupt significantly Iran's nuclear program so far?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to you. Let me give you another soundbite, if I may, of the Prime Minister of Israel. Since early 1990s, the Prime Minister has been saying that Iran is a few weeks from the bomb. You know, by 2000, Iran will get the bomb. He also, at some point, made a very interesting remark that I still cannot comprehend. And he said if Iranians were free, they would have wanted to wear jeans. And many Iranians continue to wear jeans even today. So I don't really put that much trust in the Prime Minister's words, just taking his own words, for example. But to answer your question, yes, Israelis have been able to disrupt the nuclear program, but the key is they cannot eliminate the program. And this is why they've been trying to drag the United States into the conflict, because they've realized that their stated objective of eliminating and destroying the nuclear program is not achievable. As you pointed out in your reporting, parts of Natanz enrichment facility has been attacked. The sections that provide power to those centrifuges, but the underground halls that contain the enrichment centrifuge machines have survived. Now, this means that those centrifuge machines are knocked out. Yes, that's why I say that they've been disrupted. But 2 points. First of all, there's another nuclear enrichment facility, Fordo, which the Israelis cannot destroy on their own. And that's why the Prime Minister is trying to drag President Trump into the conflict, because only the United States has the means and capacity of destroying those facilities. And secondly, there's yet another question. How are you going to bomb the knowledge out of the brains of Iranians? In very simple terms, if you know how to manufacture a car, it doesn't matter how many times you crash it. You can always rebuild the car. So I don't believe that the Israelis can destroy the Iranian nuclear program. And this is why they've changed tactics. They've gone after the Iranian oil infrastructure, residential buildings, civilian targets. As you pointed out in your report, there are 202 civilians that have been killed. And Iranian state TV did not have any nuclear material hidden in it.
Okay, so a lot of points you've made there, Professor. Let me just pick them up one by one. I do want to come to the potential of U.S. involvement in potentially trying to knock Fordo out using potentially bunker-busting bomb. But that'll be in a bit. But just on the overall point here, the IAEA said last week that Iran was in breach of its nuclear obligations for the first time in more than a decade. Why do that if Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapon? Does Iran want a nuclear weapon or not?
Iranians want to have an option for nuclear weapons. It's the same policy that the Shah pursued in 1970s. He also wanted to pursue a nuclear weapon option. Iran does not need a nuclear weapon now. I can get into the details because that's the area of my expertise, but they want to have the option that if one day the day arrives that they have no option but to resort to the ultimate weapon of defense, yeah, sure, why not?
Are we in that situation already, given the kind of attacks that Iran is facing?
Well, this is a very good question. I would say from a, I don't want to get into, a difficult, language, but I would say this is the moment, but they've been being attacked so hard that I don't think they have the opportunity. The question is, how will Iranians react after the conflict ends? Because these attacks show two things. First of all, they cannot rely on the IAEA or international community to condemn the attacks on nuclear facilities, because it is explicitly prohibited in international law that states should refrain from attacking nuclear facilities because of the environmental damages that they could, because of civilian casualties, all those things. The additional protocol of Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits attacking nuclear facilities. So anyway, point is, at some point, Iranians may realize that let's try to get the bomb and deter the Israelis. And if I may make one more point very quickly, Israelis have superior firepower, both in conventional terms, and we must also keep in mind that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that possesses 90 nuclear warheads. And if I was sitting in Israel, I wouldn't want another country in the region to have nuclear weapons either, to maintain that monopoly on possession of nuclear weapons.
So if that, I mean, Israel firstly neither confirms nor denies whether it has a nuclear weapon. It'll be an interesting question to put to Danny Citrinowicz, who will be joining us shortly. He's somebody who is well informed about Israel, having worked in Israeli military intelligence. That'll be a question for him. But you say that you can understand the logic that if you have a nuclear weapon, you would not want somebody else to have it, especially if it's your arch rival. If that is really the case, it stands to reason then that Iran should have been prepared for some sort of an attack like this. But given the kind of attacks that we're seeing, the kind of damage that we're seeing just in Tehran, the kind of Israeli Air Force jets flying over Tehran, it would appear that Tehran or Iran wasn't prepared for this, and therefore you have all these rows of people, of cars trying to flee Tehran. I mean, nobody seems to be protecting the Iranians here.
Well, let me first of all say that Danny is a great analyst, and he's a great friend of mine, and I hope he's doing fine and his family is safe. But look, Iranians were caught off guard. They were not expecting it. And this is why you see in the first 24 hours of the attacks, Iranians did not respond or could not respond. But it's only after the first day or the second day that Iranians seem to have pulled themselves together and retaliated against the Israelis. So this is what I think what happened. But I think there's also a broader objective that the Israelis are pursuing. And just going back to what Prime Minister of Israel said a few months ago, this notion of a new Middle East. When you look at the picture of the region, Syria is knocked out, is a failed state. Egypt is weak. Jordan is weak. They both made peace with Israel, but they don't pose any sort of threat to Israel. Turkey is part of NATO. They have cordial relations, more or less. So Iran is the only country that, because of its size and its population and natural resources, could pose a threat to Israel. And Israel wants to be the Israelis think that they have the moment to become the absolute hegemon of the region.
But you know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Professor. It's not just a matter of natural resources and size, right? You're talking about Iran, which has been boosting proxies, which are recognized as terror groups around the world. You're talking about Hamas, you're talking about Hezbollah, you're talking about the Houthis. So it's not just a matter of, oh, Iran has mineral resources and therefore it is facing flack from others. It is supporting terror organizations in the region and hence disrupting stability in the region. I mean, in a way, you could argue that Iran should have been perhaps more careful and potentially more constructive in the region than it has been.
Well, when I say natural resources and size and population, all of these contribute to a country's military power. Those are the, a country's military power is not simply, how many divisions or how many tanks have. It's also the economy that supports that. And yes, it is absolutely true that Iran supports these non-state, what they call non-state friends. But we also have to keep in mind that the history of these groups go back to the time of the Shah. It was the Shah of Iran who started spending money in Lebanon to support Shias in that country to protect Iran's interests. The Shah also supported Yemen and the Houthis, not the Houthis, excuse me. The Shah also intervened in Yemen and Oman and even Syria. Why? Because Iranian leadership, because of the geographical facts that they cannot change, they believe that they need to take the fight away from Iranian borders and abroad to make sure that what they perceive as their threats cannot make a move on Iran. Now, I absolutely agree with you that supporting Hezbollah and all these groups have, in the long term, have not served Iranian interests, and we are where we are. But also the problem with these groups is that they don't simply listen to Tehran. What I mean is Iran doesn't pick up the phone and tell the Houthis to attack or Hamas to attack.
But they do deliver weapons to them.
They support them, absolutely. Iran supports them. Iran transfers technology to them because Iran views them as the extension of its military power in the region.
Biresh, I just want to interrupt the conversation a little bit because I want to share what's happening in the chat. A lot of people seem to be listening to what you guys are talking about, but reacting emotionally. One from Duncan Stewart says, war is a tax on humanity. I think people are just really horrified and are concerned about just how much this will escalate. A bit more cynical of a take, someone saying same shit over and over again. Hopefully I can say that on DW News. If it's on YouTube, I don't know. The YouTube is different than the broadcast, hopefully. But that is capturing a sense of how people feel. And also, hello, Carolina Vienna, one of our regulars, saying Iran may intensify their nuclear enrichment after this conflict. This is definitely something that many people are talking about, and we are talking about here. So keep those comments coming, but also keep in mind that these are amazing experts and that you have a unique opportunity to throw them some questions. So send those questions over.
Absolutely. I mean,
may I ask add one quick point on Israel's nuclear arsenal? Yes, the deal between the United States and Israel is that Israel will never declare its nuclear program in return for the United States never asking from them. That was a deal that Prime Minister Golda Meir made with President Nixon in 1970s. But it is widely accepted that Israel has 90 nuclear warheads with additional fissile material for about roughly 200 more nuclear weapons.
Okay, we don't know how this current conflict, this current round of missile exchanges and exchange of fire ends, Professor. But I mean, help us understand what the thinking in Tehran here will be. I mean, of course, the first thing is to try and respond to what the Israelis are doing and the kind of attacks that are coming from the part of Israel. But long term, do you think there is a hardening of views in Tehran right now in which the regime says, you know what, we will ride out this storm in some way or in some shape or form, but in the end, we just now have to get a nuclear weapon? Is that what is potentially happening there?
I don't know if they will. I think that the hardening of the Iranian position, absolutely yes. I also agree with you that they think that they can ride the storm, and you just pointed out to the Persian strategic thinking that we are here for the long term and not the short term. Iranians strongly believe, because of the experiences that they've had over the past 100 years. Think of it, in less than a century, Iran has been invaded 3 times during World War I, World War II, and the Iran-Iraq War. And in all these conflicts, Iran was a victim of foreign aggression. And they believe that international law has not protected them. Again, their neutrality during World War I, World War II didn't help them. International law didn't come to Iran's assistance when Iraq was using chemical weapons against Iranians. So their view is that, and if I may borrow from Professor Mearsheimer, in international politics, God only helps those who help themselves, which means that nuclear weapons might be necessary to protect the country in the face of foreign aggression.
Okay, you say this right now, but then remember these Israeli strikes on Iran happened just days before talks with the United States were to happen over the weekend in Oman. These were to be nuclear talks. What was Iran prepared to accept in those talks, given what you have just told me?
Excellent question. I think that Iranians and the Americans were close to have a framework over a potential deal. If I may go back a little bit, Iranians insist that the NPT gives them the right to enrich uranium. The U.S., that's their legal interpretation of the NPT. The American
to enrich uranium to military grade, is that what you're saying?
No. Let me say the American perspective, and then I'll answer your question. The American perspective is that the text of the NPT, the Article 4 of the NPT, which Iranians refer to, does not explicitly give the right to enrich uranium. So that's a difference of interpretation in that of the same text. Now, Iranians think that they want to have they would like to have a limited enrichment capacity. They have no problem with capping it to 3.67%, which is low enriched uranium, just as they did under the JCPOA. This is something that President Obama realized, that without this limited enrichment, we're not going to get a deal. Now, Donald Trump, as you know, withdrew from the agreement, said, we don't want to deal with the JCPOA. Now he's forced to negotiate because of the advancements in Iran's capacity. But his position is zero enrichment again. So you have a country that says, NPT gives me the right to enrich, and a country, that's the United States, a country that says, no, we're not going to give you enrichment. And the reason is the United States, and this is scientifically correct, theoretically correct, that a country that can enrich uranium and has mastered enrichment, uranium enrichment, can theoretically develop nuclear weapons should it decide to do so. So it's no longer a question of capacity, it's the question of the intent. So Iranians were willing to accept very strong inspection mechanism and caps on their nuclear program, just as they did under JCPOA. But the US was saying, no, zero enrichment, which Iranians categorically rejected. There was also a question of, or kind of a plan of having a concession or a facility that Iran and the United States and some of the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf would all participate in this, you can call it a bank, a fuel bank, where everybody would take advantage of this uranium enrichment. That would have solved the problem for a lot of countries. Iran could have claimed that they can enrich uranium. The US could have said, well, we've prevented Iran from using that fuel for potential weapons purposes. And the Saudis could have also said that they're also expanding their nuclear program. They could have said, well, we are participating in this. We're also getting our nuclear fuel too. So it was a, everybody's happy plan, which now is off the table.
You guys have been, we've mostly been talking about nuclear weapons, but there is, at the risk of sort of changing the subject a little bit, if it's okay.
Go on.
Oh, okay. Well, we do have a comment here from someone in chat, and I think it'll be, I'll read the comment, and I would love to hear your take on the comment. Ismarek is saying, I think this lack of ability to defend itself, this person is talking about Iran, does show the power of sanctions. I don't know if you think that is the correct interpretation. And they go on to say that Iran's only deterrent was regional proxies because they could not acquire the advanced defensive capabilities for itself. Is that an accurate statement? How would you respond to this person?
Well, I would say that it is partially correct and it's partially not. So Iran's defense strategy was based on three pillars. One, as this guest pointed out, the regional proxies, which were supposed to, as I said, take Iran's fight away from Iran's border and to the adversary's neighborhood. So that's one of the pillars. Secondly, it was the missile program, the ballistic missile program, which is quite capable, and it was to replace the aging Iranian Air Force, which is incapable of projecting power in the region. So that's the second pillar of Iran's defense strategy. And the third pillar was the nuclear program, which, again, as I said, if you can enrich uranium, in theory, you can always go for the bomb if there's a political decision of the leadership and the military in any country. So right now, those proxy forces, or I hate to use proxy because I don't think it is 100% accurate. So I would say non-state friends. The non-state actors have been weakened. Hezbollah has been weakened. Hamas has been weakened. Houthis have made their own ceasefire with the United States. So those are out of the question. Right now, Iran is relying mainly on its ballistic missile program that has shown to be capable of penetrating the Iron Dome. You also have the nuclear program, which, as we discussed earlier, has been disrupted, and I think that's the right word to use. But the question is, what Iranians will do next, I have no idea. I also wanted to point out very quickly on the issue of sanctions. Iran has been under economic sanctions for years, but it's also under the U.S. arms embargo, meaning that the U.S. not only doesn't sell weapon systems to Iran, but it goes abroad and prevents other countries from selling any military equipment to Iranians.
You wanted to bring in something?
There is another question from somebody. Again, it's not related to nuclear weapons, but Ravi Raushan is asking, can we talk about the accomplishments of Mossad in all of this? And certainly Iran has been on the back foot. That's the context in which we are talking about all this, is that they're kind of in trouble between a rock and a hard place. I don't know if you have any thoughts on some of the particular accomplishments. I don't know if that's the right word, but sort of...
The way they carried out their operation. I mean, maybe a brief comment from you, Professor. We're waiting on Danny to sort of come in at some point, but maybe a brief comment from you, and then I'd like to bring in another guest.
Sure. I'm sure Danny can speak way better than I can on Mossad. Yeah. But look, the Israeli intelligence, as always, has shown to be very effective, very efficient in its operations, and Iranian intelligence has long been penetrated by the Israelis, and they have many reasons to commit espionage. First of all, because of the situation with the economy, a lot of people have reason to receive financial compensation in return for committing espionage. It's also ideological. Many people resent the oppressive nature of the Iranian government. People are rightfully angry with some of the things that the Iranian government is doing. So that's ideological reasons. Thirdly, some of it is personal. What I mean by that is, for example, in the past, we had situations where an Iranian pilot, this is 1980s, defected to Iraq with an Iranian F-14 Tomcat. Why? Because his brother was arrested and because he had some one of those the old Betamax videotapes, and just to, I don't know, get back at the Iranian government, he defected. So there are many, and some of them for blackmail. And Mossad, I think, has been very effective. The Israeli intelligence has always been good at this, and they've proven to be able to penetrate Iranian intelligence. I've seen footage of drone manufacturing homes in Iran that Israeli intelligence used to attack Iranian facilities. So absolutely, I would 100% agree that they have been very successful, but I don't know, as you can imagine, I don't know the operational details of Mossad.
Right. Professor Azodi, we promised to sort of free you up by this time today, and we will live up to that promise. Thanks so much for sharing your views and details on the thinking behind all of this in Tehran. Particularly, we do treasure that perspective. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
And at this point, I'd like to bring in another guest. This is Professor Fawaz Gerges from the London School of Economics. He's a professor of international relations there. And if you watch DW News, Professor Gerges is not going to be a stranger to you. Professor Gerges, thanks so much for making the time. I don't know how much of the conversation you got over there, but we were talking to Professor Azodi, just trying to understand the perspective in Tehran at this time. And with that having been said, there's something I want to put to you. Donald Trump had called for, quote, an unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime in a social media post. And you've had Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responding just a few hours back, threatening irreparable damage to the United States military if it gets involved. Is this raising the stakes here in the conflict? And do you think that the US military will get involved?
Having me. It's always a pleasure to be on DW. I think reading President Trump's tweets in the past 24 hours tells me that asking Iran for unconditional surrender means that President Trump is no longer interested in negotiation. Mm-hmm. He made it very clear in another post. He said, I'm no longer interested. And there's growing evidence that President Trump is basically leaning and edging toward the United States getting involved in the war against Iran. There is a great deal of evidence. The fact is, he said we. He referred to the United States as controlling the airwaves over Iran. Remember, President Trump loves winners. It's all about winning. Loves strongman. And President Trump believes that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is gaining the upper hand. Mm-hmm. He wants to really bandwagon with the winner. So I don't really basically, I mean, if you ask me, what's the percentage? I would say 55, 60% that the US will basically join Israel's war on Iran in the next 24 hours or 48 hours.
I know, Melissa.
I'm not surprised by...
I know Melissa wants to come in. Just on that point, I just wanted to ask you, when you say the US will get involved, is it primarily to, in the first instance, knock out Fordo nuclear plant? Because there is all this talk about the US using bunker. Is that what you heard?
That's exactly
I did not know that Melissa wanted to bring this in,
yes.
but there is somebody. Go on, ask the question, because that's the question that I had.
Well, then great minds think alike. Nilay Chaturvedi has that question, which is how would Israel destroy the lead facility at Fordo when it's buried under hundreds of meters of concrete for which a bunker buster is required, which only Americans possess?
Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying very hard to convince Donald Trump to basically use American buster bombers and fighters B-52, because only the United States has the bigger bombers and bomb busters to attack Fordo. So I think this would be the main target. But I think joining the war, if Donald Trump decides to join the war, this would be all-out war. This will not be just one target, because it's really no longer about Iran's nuclear program anymore, as you know. President Trump basically threatened in a veiled threat to kill the supreme leader of Iran, which is illegal in the United States. I can tell you as an American myself, after the Vietnam War, there are laws on the books which prevent an American president from ordering the assassination assassination of foreign leaders. Another point you asked me about what Ali Khamenei said. I think his response, his defiant response, tell me that we're going to see more and more escalation, because this will basically provide ammunition to Donald Trump, who does not like to be challenged. So because Iran at this stage is really pressed between a rock of unconditional surrender, humiliation, or basically fight to the end. And the supreme leader has decided to fight. He said he wants to fight to the end. So sadly and tragically, I think we're going to see more escalation, and more likely we're going to see the United States entering the fray of the war.
All right, hold that thought, because I'd like to bring in an expert that we've been promising all you guys watching the stream, Danny Citrinowicz. He's a Middle East expert from the Atlantic Council. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Danny. Just a bit of a background about you. You also worked in Israeli military intelligence on the Iran desk, so you have been closely involved with all this. Before I get your views, I'd just like to play a soundbite from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Earlier in the stream, we had played a soundbite in which he was talking about a threat from Iran's nuclear facilities. There is a soundbite as well in which he's talking about another potential aim of this Israeli operation in Iran. Let's just play that soundbite, and then I'll come to you.
The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker.
Danny Citrinowicz, does Israel want regime change in Iran, and is that the goal of this operation?
Well, the declared goal, as we know, is limiting or depriving the Iranian nuclear capabilities, but also its missile capabilities. But obviously, when you follow everything that Prime Minister Netanyahu said in recent days, talking also about the killing of Khamenei itself, it's obvious that the the Israeli government and the Prime Minister Netanyahu itself are aiming for regime change. The problem that they have, Israel have, that only Israel itself it's not enough. In order to topple this regime, Israel needs the U.S. And I think that Netanyahu is working hard, as been mentioned in the last days or maybe weeks, even before the campaign itself started, to convince President Trump to get into the war, because he believed that beside the fact of Fordo, he's able to work with him in order to topple this regime. So I think this is where Israel is going. I think that Netanyahu feels it's a historic moment in time that he can change the Middle East at all in toppling Khamenei, toppling the Islamic Republic of Iran, and thus will bring peace and prosperity to the region. So I really think that this war is not over. By now, it's not over the Iranian nuclear capabilities or the missile one. What Israel is attacking in the previous days actually highlight that, from the Iranian broadcasting services through other elements connected to regime itself. Definitely the aim is not longer to depriving or limiting the Iranian nuclear or missile capabilities. Israel is still doing that, but obviously it's expanding the war, expanding the campaign, hoping that with use of the military might of Israel and the U.S. were able to topple this regime.
Professor Gerges believes that it is, 65%, up to 65% you were, Professor Gerges, that the possibility that America joins this fight. So, Danny, what you're basically saying is that the U.S., if it were to join, it would stay in the fight until there is regime change, correct?
Well, we know we have two options. First is what we call the small option, that the U.S. is entering only to destroy Fordo, and the bigger option of U.S. entering to that. But we have to remember that if the U.S. will enter and destroy Fordo, the Iranian will probably retaliate. The Iranians now hoping that they're still able to keep the U.S. outside of the war itself. They want the war to be focused between them and Israel, reaching some sort of attrition war that they're able to win in terms of the arsenal they still have regarding their missiles. They're achieving, as they think, achievements on the ground because of that. So they believe that without enabling or entering U.S. into the war, they're able actually to win this war, build the deterrence equation with Israel. If the U.S. will enter the war, they will have to retaliate, from blocking the Hormuz states to attacking the U.S. presence in the region, and that automatically will lead to escalation. So even if the U.S. is entering only to bomb Fordo, it will lead to, for sure, for a wider escalation that we ever anticipated.
There's a lot of questions coming in right now. I'm going to make this a twofer. A question from, wow, this user has way too many letters in your account. So I'm going to just ask the question. Who would be the new leader of Iran if there is regime change? Maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but certainly a lot of people doing a lot of speculating. And then another question asking that if the United States gets involved, does that also mean that other countries like Russia or China would join and help Iran? This is from Justin Brian Bolano. I don't know who wants to take
well,
that.
I will just start, and of course, Professor Gerges can continue. If we will decide to topple this regime, and again, it's a little bit early for that, but assuming that US will join Israel, we are entering an uncharted territory. We don't know. And sometimes the devil that we know is the better devil than the devil that we don't know. I'm saying that because we can find ourselves with Iran under the RGC control. We can find ourselves Iran just in pieces, in shredded pieces with nuclear capabilities. So we have to be very careful thinking that we can speculate what will happen. We have numerous examples in the previous history, especially in the Middle East, that you thought you're going to change for the good and you change for the bad. So there is no natural leader. So we have to remember that. Regarding the second question, it's an important one. I think that Trump really believed that by showing force against Iran, he can deter China, he can deter Russia, and show them what the US is able to do after Israel did what he did in Iran, just to show them that if, for example, China will decide to invade Taiwan or Russia continue its war in Ukraine, you will see the mighty power of the US Army. So I think he doesn't assume that they will help Iran. He assumed that he can deter Iran, but by entering the war against, deterring China and Russia by entering a war against Iran.
Professor Gerges, if not the current regime, then who?
Yes, you are ahead of yourselves. We are ahead of ourselves. The war has just started. There is no alternative to the regime inside Iran, and there's no alternative to the regime outside Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu's overarching strategic aim is delusional. Netanyahu is delusional. Has he defeated Hamas after 19 months of overwhelming force? Hamas is a tiny organization. Hezbollah has been weakened a great deal, but Hezbollah is still standing. Trust me on this point. Hezbollah is recovering. Hezbollah's conventional force is fully intact. Iran is neither Hamas nor Hezbollah. Iran is not even Iraq, has multiple institutions. Iran will fight for years. No major air force, no major air campaign in history could destroy a very deeply embedded regime like the Iranian regimes. Final point about Benjamin Netanyahu's call on the Iranian people to stand up, to rise up against the Ayatollahs in Tehran. First of all, there is considerable opposition, domestic opposition, to the Iranian regime inside Iran. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Iranians have protested over the years because they want to live a free life. They want to breathe. The state's intrusion into everyday life. But what Israel has done, and we have multiple reports, Iran is a civilizational state. Iran is not a colonially constructed state like Israel or Lebanon or Syria. The Iranian people, 90 million people, are nationalists. They realize their government, their nation, their sovereignty is being attacked. They will rally around the flag, make no doubts about it. Many reports I was receiving, and I talked to many Iranians inside Iran. In fact, they're very angry at their government. Guess why? They're angry against government because it did not weaponize its nuclear program. They say, why did we wait a long time? Why didn't we build a credible and effective nuclear deterrent force? Why did we allow a tiny state like Israel to really humiliate?
Is that a majority opinion? Is that a majority opinion, Professor?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. We're just talking about report people. But my take, knowing what we know about the Iranian people, I just want to give you an example. During the Iraq-Iran war between 1980 and 1988, Saddam Hussein used thousands of ballistic missiles against Tehran. He used chemical weapons. He devastated Iranian cities. For 8 years, make no doubts about it, Iran will fight to the end. This is a long war, even if the United States enters. And the damage to Iran will be catastrophic. But in fact, anyone who talks about an alternative or regime change, this is more a propaganda campaign. And only naive people really believe in this kind of, far-fetched scenario that does not really apply to a state, does not really have borders with Iran. Remember, this is an air campaign, does not involve any troops on the ground.
Okay. Just to come back, just to dial back to a point that both of you seem to be in agreement on, some sort of U.S. involvement in the current conflict, whether it is limited or whether it is extended. The point that you were making, Danny, earlier was that there'll be a wider escalation in the region. Can you run us through some scenarios as to what kind of escalation you're talking about and which countries it draws into this conflagration?
Yeah, you have to remember the first and foremost, the main goal of the Iranian regime right now is preventing the U.S. from entering the war. Mm-hmm. The threat that Khamenei is declaring, are not intending to allure U.S. to the war. On the contrary, because they believe, like Professor Gaba said, that they can conduct a war of attrition with Israel and build the deterrence equation in a way that it will erode Israel's achievements in this campaign. And given, we have to remember the fact that Israel, despite the achievements, we are paying a severe price. Civilians are being killed. The economic situation in Israel deteriorating, and all of other examples that actually show that Israel has resilience issues. Now, the question: who is going to be more resilient? And we have to remember, like Professor Gaba said, how much resilient were the Iranians, the Iran-Iraqi war. So we have to be very cautious in what we are saying and the outreach of Israel in that regard. Continue to what you ask. Assuming that the U.S. will enter the war, I think that the Iranians have a couple of capabilities that they didn't show until today in the war against Israel. First and foremost, it's the issue of course, attacking the U.S. presence in the region. They have abilities to do that. It's a shorter range missile, so they have that in the thousands. It's easier to launch it than what they're launching against the state of Israel. And even more than that, they have the ability, of course, to cause economical problem to the world by closing the Hormuz Straits, whether by ships or by mines. Above that, of course, they have the ability to hit oil facilities in the region. Now, we know that Iran did a lengthy process, the TAN process, with its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia and UAE. But if the regime will feel that it's back against the wall, we cannot rule out anything in terms of what the regime can do. So I think, again, it's not the first priority of Iran. Iran wants to prevent the U.S. from entering. It wants to deter the U.S. from entering, hence what the Supreme Leader said. But when push comes to shove, they will do the utmost that the world, the international community will understand, will pay the price for it, and pressure the U.S. to stop the war.
So help us understand, is this the reason why you have Saudi Arabia releasing a statement talking about Iran as a brotherly nation? Correct me if I'm wrong, that was the kind of language that was there in the Saudi statement. And then you have, for example, Jordan as well, shooting down Iranian drones and missiles, which just sort of sounds counterintuitive, given that these countries had fought wars with Israel in the past.
Professor? I think the most important thing I will take in a quick one and I'll let people to complete that. Sorry, I just want to say one important thing about that. The main issue, the main important year in this, we got into an important question in 2019 when Iran attacked Aramco facilities and there was no response by the US. Then MBS took a strategic decision to do the repertoire process with Iran. Also, the Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, afraid from a spillover, from the fact that this war will become not an Israeli-Irani war, but a regional war if the US will enter the war. This is why it's very important to see the connection between MBS, MBZ, and President Trump these days. I'm not sure that they are pushing the US to enter the war. On the contrary, they are seeking to end this war. It's not that they don't want to weaken the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's a fierce enemy of both countries. But in terms of realpolitik, they're afraid of the implications. So this is why they are not interested, as I see, that right now that the U.S. will enter and will escalate things, but that I will stop here and let, of course, Professor Gard actually work.
Professor Gerges, please.
I think what we have seen in the past few years is normalization of relations between Iran and its Gulf neighbors. This is a strategic decision on the part of the Gulf states, because the strategic priority of the Gulf state is domestic politics, diversifying the economy. It's Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince vision for 2030, and the same thing with the Emirati president. So they are very much genuine about the fact that they are anxious and concerned about any regional war that could really destroy the political economy of the Gulf. The political economy of the Gulf relies on energy and on oil and strategic waterways. And Iran has the capacity. It could easily mine the Strait of Hormuz. It could easily basically destroy the political economy of energy, even with some very small mines. Even think of what the Houthis in Yemen have done to Bab al-Mandab. Iran has bigger, capacity. And in terms of what Israel has done, and this is the larger point, I want you to know, as a specialist on the Arab world and the Middle East, there is now relative consensus that Israel is out of control, that Israel is a hegemonic power, that Israel is the central core of instability in the region. President Erdogan gives...
I don't know, Professor, if there is consensus on that. It might be a point of view in certain people, but is it not a stretch to say there is a consensus on that?
Relative consensus, even in the Gulf. They have impressed on President Trump what's happening in Gaza, that the war crimes, the killing of a large number of Palestinians. I mean, you and I were talking about top down.
Yeah,
again, I'm talking about bottom up.
Just for a bit of context, I mean, no one has, no court of law has said that war crimes are happening in Gaza. It is something that is under deliberation. It's not. There's no judgment on that. But yes, please carry on.
I think let me stop you here. The International Court, the Criminal Court, has issued 2 warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the defense ministers.
I know, I realize. And I'm not defending it.
No, I'm just.
I just want to provide.
I know you have.
I just want to provide the context here that there has been no judgment, no verdict on it. Certain actions have taken place, but then that doesn't imply, therefore, that said crimes or said allegations are true. That's all I want to say. But you were making a wider point, please.
Yeah, I know you have a right. International human rights organizations, multiple United Nations officials have made it very clear that hundreds of war crimes have been committed. But I hear you. The King of Jordan yesterday, King Abdullah, made it very clear that Israel's war on Iran, in fact, has changed the battleground, the battlefield. Egypt, I mean, I want you to know, and this is a critical point. I'm not making a point here, political point. We're all, big boys and girls. Your audience is too intelligent to realize that a pontificating professor is accusing Israel of war crimes. That's not my point. I want you to know that Israel now lives by the sword. Israel has mastered the art of making enemies. Egypt and Jordan, I had never seen relation between Egypt and Jordan, 2 of the earliest states that normalized relations with Israel, as bad as they are. There is a popular revolt brewing under the surface in many countries, including in the Gulf. So when I say this, I don't say it because I want to make a political argument. I say that even Gulf leaders are terrified of the popular reverberations. What Israel is doing is really basically making enemies, more enemies, that it could really digest in the next 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 years.
I know that, Professor, you have to leave in about 8 minutes. Therefore, I mean, I would have come to Danny right now, but let me just come to you. We were talking about U.S. involvement, and I think, Melissa, one of the questions that had come in earlier in the stream was about what about the other countries, for example, Russia and China. And I wanted your take on that, Professor Gerges. Do you think, what is the role here from countries like Russia, which has a strategic partnership with Iran, something that they signed 6 months back, if I'm not wrong? And then what about the role of China? Do you see any sort of involvement here from these countries?
And I just add, you mentioned talking about mining the Straits of Hormuz. That would negatively impact the Chinese, something that they would not like to see.
And the Chinese were very unhappy with what the Houthis have been doing in the Bab al-Mandab, because they have a major economic interest. Look, Iran is alone in this battle. No one is coming to the aid of Iran. Iran is facing the brunt of Israeli power, American power, and many Western powers, including Germany and Britain and France. At the end of the day, I mean, I was a bit taken by the Chinese statement. The Chinese statement said, quote unquote, the foreign minister said, we are ready to defend the sovereignty of Iran. The Chinese president today said he was deeply concerned. And the Russian president is also called Donald Trump and talked to him for about 50 minutes, trying to really find a way out. But at the end of the day, Putin made it very clear that Israel is not interested in negotiations. My take on it is that neither Russia nor China could make a big difference in this particular war. If there is one person who could end this war, is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump seems to be, in fact, urging and leaning towards military intervention as opposed to putting an end to this war.
We'll leave it there for the moment with you, Professor Gerges. I know you have a class to attend, and you've been able to squeeze in some time for us. Thanks so much. We always love it when you make the time for us. Thanks for doing that today, this afternoon. Fawaz Gerges, Professor of International Relations, London School of Economics. Thanks so much, sir. We'll speak to you again on another occasion. But thanks so much for today. Danny, I just wanted to sort of come to you, just again, staying with Russia and China. Help me understand why Russia does not want to help Iran, given that Iran has been helping Russia in Ukraine.
Well, first we have to remember that the doctrine of the Iranian is self-sustained in a way that they do not like to be seen as leaning on other superpowers, looking at the history. So they don't want the Russians to come to their help in a way that Russian soldier will land in Iran. Iran will defend itself by its capabilities. I think that what we're seeing Russia support on the political level, and also I believe that we'll see maybe in terms of the weaponization or sending arms after the conflict will relax. But I think in the end of the day, Iran doesn't want to be seen as someone that needs the protection of the West, because this is against the pillar of the Iranian revolutionary, the Iranian revolution in general. And we have to remember other thing related to that. Russia has other interests rather than Iran. First and foremost, the issue of relation with the US and the war in Ukraine. And I think that for them, that's the top priority. Iran is important, but it's in second place. So those countries have strategic cooperation, but it's not alliance in the way that one will help the other. So we have to remember that as well. It's not a pact, a military pact that Russia will have to defend Iran. And regarding China, the same thing. I think the Chinese are very worried about what will happen in the Gulf in terms of the oil. As we all know, most of the energy of China comes from the Middle East. They want calm and prosperity in the Middle East. They have cooperation with Iran, with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia. And I think they don't want to see escalation of the war. This is why I think the Chinese are pressing the US to stop the war and start negotiation with Iran. We know that basically wants to have negotiation. I'm not sure they are willing to forgo enrichment in Iran itself, but they want to start negotiating. And I think the Chinese are doing the utmost to pressure the US in that regard. But again, the next 24 hours will be crucial to understand where this campaign is going. If the US will enter the war, it's an escalation. If it's not entering the war, it's or Israel pushing for a political solution or a war of some sort of attrition that can have it for weeks and maybe even more than that.
I mean, earlier, Biresh was asking about how the Gulf states are so reluctant. They just really would not like this to spiral and grow. We have a question here from Happy asking, is there a possibility for the neighboring Arab countries to join for or against Iran or Israel? I mean, the takeaway previously is that they just don't want to get involved. But is there a situation, Danny, where you see that they have no choice but to get involved? And if that is the case, where would they sort of focus their efforts on?
I don't see them involved militarily in any sort of way. I think that they will try the utmost to stay out. They have so much to lose if the war will some sort of spill over toward the territories. Mm-hmm. So I think they will be very cautious to enter. We have to remember that these countries understand they will have to live in Iran in the day after. So they have to be very cautious in their behavior in this campaign itself. This is why they are putting the utmost, making the utmost to make sure that the Iranians will know they're not supporting the war in any sort of way. And I think that is why we saw the recent cooperation or phone call between Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, and MBS and MBZ. So I don't see them intervening. Definitely, they're working behind the scene. Definitely, they're putting a lot of pressure. We have to remember that Trump was in the region not long ago, exactly. Heard MBS, heard MBZ saying that we are not interested in escalating or a war with Iran, and definitely not U.S. escalating the war in Iran. So this is something that we'll have to see in the next couple of hours, because what will happen, as I said earlier, what will happen the next day or two will have a tremendous effect not only in Iran, but also in those countries. Escalation will be almost imminent if the US decide to enter this war. This is why everybody is doing the utmost to prevent President Trump, that we don't know what he will decide, prevent him from deciding that.
Can you talk a little bit about what kind of leverage they would have? I mean, Saudi Arabia, big country, lots of oil, but really, what kind of leverage? Can they do any threats?
Well, we saw in the recent visit of President Trump to the region that he's looking at them as an important economical player that can really invest in the American economy. They can buy, they can sell, they can be a hub for a lot of American industries. It's not that the EU is dependent on the oil, but definitely they have impact on the oil prices. And this is another element that the US doesn't want to see spiral in so many ways. So I think that they have the tools in terms of ability to influence it, especially when Trump think highly of MBS and NBC. So I think that they have the tool, the personal connection and their ability to invest in the American economy and so forth and so forth. The thing is, and we have to remember one important thing in that regard, is we don't understand where Trump is going in a way that what influencing more, his way of thinking that he has to join the winners and to enter the war in a way that it will show the American power to the Chinese, to the Russians, to other enemies of the US, or we understand the risk, because entering this war, as mentioned, will cause escalation that will have influence on Iran and other countries and the neighbors in the region. So we don't know what weight more. We have to wait and see. But definitely those countries, I'm sure that working behind the scene, doing the utmost in order to prevent Trump from deciding to enter this war.
A very interesting 24 hours we're going to have. As you say, we need to wait and see what happens in that. Just one final question to you, and I want to throw a poll question. We have a poll running in the community chat side by side, Danny, and I want to ask you this question for your response to it. The question that we are asking our viewers, our community is, who will come out the strongest from the Iran-Israel conflict? The options we have are the United States, Iran, Israel, and the Gulf states. What would be your answer?
Well, we still don't know, because we are only in the, maybe, I don't know if it's the first stages or the middle stages of the war, but we don't know. You know, if the US will enter the war, definitely Israel is going to be the winner, because it's pushed the US to do something unprecedented to fight against Iran. And now it's going to be also the US problem, and they will continue fighting, and in a way that really degrading the Iran capabilities. If US won't enter this war, and Israel has no ability to destroy Fordo, so I'm not sure Israel is the winner, because if the Iranians were left with substantial amount of nuclear uranium and centrifuges in Fordo, then we cannot say that Israel is the winner, especially if Iran will decide to cross the threshold for 90% and nothing will happen. Even we don't know if that's even happening now in Fordo, because we don't have inspection there. So it's very hard to tell. In the US, it looks like they are the winners, but if they're going to enter the war and find themselves in a new Vietnam, then what will happen? So it's very hard to answer that. Until now, for sure, Israel has the upper hand. That goes without saying. But if the war will continue and we find ourselves in a attrition war and we lost a lot of our capabilities, or even in terms of achievements in this war, then I'm not sure that strategically it was worthwhile to Israel to initiate this war from begin with. So we have to wait and see how things will develop, especially in the next 24, 48 hours.
Hindsight is 20/20.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Danny Citrinowicz, Middle East expert from the Atlantic Council. Thanks so much, Danny, for making the time, and I hope you stay safe. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think for me, that's a segue to Cherry, because I don't know if you've closed the poll or not, but I just felt compelled to ask Danny that poll question. He said it was a hard question to answer, but I wonder what the community thought.
Yeah, I think the community also have very diverse opinions on this question. So let me just repeat our question. I mean, you also did it just now, but I will still do it again. Who will come out the strongest from the Iran-Israel conflict? We've got 863 votes, and 34% votes for Israel, 23% votes for the United States, 22 voted for Iran, and 19 voted for the Gulf states. So they are actually quite
Split,
close. Yeah.
But it's generally in line with the kind of discussion that we've been having, what Danny has been saying, right?
I just want to add some comments that didn't come to our discussion before. I think many people feel very sad about the conflict. Some people are saying that we are missing one option in the poll, that is no one, everyone loses. And someone are also saying that people are dying for nothing, and let's hope that this doesn't escalate. So I think this is an important message that I think we should think about also.
And a good message at which to end this conversation.
Yeah.
Unless there is something that you would like to say.
No, I think that's the best way to end it. Our viewers are wise and they know what is absolutely the most important, which is peace, and the loss of human lives is a great tragedy. So we really appreciate your feedback and the reminder that we cover the news, but at the end of the day, what's most important is the human story and what happens to ordinary people.
And that is something that we also try and cover here on News Desk, which you can watch again next week and 24 hours before. We will have the theme. Hopefully it's not the Iran-Israel conflict, and hopefully there is something just changed by then, but you never know. But stay tuned. On Tuesday next week, you should potentially have the theme for the discussion on the Wednesday. But thanks so much for being a part of this discussion. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.